In today's episode, we examine one of the most tragic human octopus love stories in existence. Howdy. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. And folks, it is tragic. Let's admit it. And Tilda Swinton's voice work was incredible. But I love the TV show The Boys, and it was an absolute pleasure to have an episode with director Catriona McKenzie talking about her penultimate episode of Season 4, Episode 7, The Insider. The Boys is just one of those perfect comic book adaptations, and I've been blown away by it. The writing is spectacular. The directing is spectacular. The acting, just everything about it. I absolutely love this show. So this was a really fun episode for me. And Catriona is a good interview because she has experience working with comic book intellectual properties. She's also directed dramas. She has a really good, diverse background as a director. And she brought all that, of course, to this episode. Without a doubt, Catriona was very forthcoming about her creative process and what it took to get this episode made. And it was complicated. One sequence in particular that we talk about took 10 days to shoot, which is usually how long an entire episode of television is sometimes recorded. But that was just one scene, so it's kind of crazy. But this was a great interview with a lot of in-depth insights into how The Boys gets made, so I know you'll dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig, it's Backstory's 12th birthday this summer. That's right, we turned 12, and issue 52 is our latest issue. It has a lot of movie and television coverage, and of course, a lot of Emmys coverage. And Emmy nominations have just come out, so it's fun for you to still read issue 52 and see the scripts of the shows that were nominated and read those great interviews. Remember, if you've never read Backstory before, you could read us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. There is a free issue for you to read right there, and if you enjoy the free issue, and I would hope that you do, you could become a subscriber. And to save you a little money on subscription, use this code at our website, SAVE5. That will save you $5 off a one-year subscription. And look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and iTunes and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where all these Zoomcasts go. It would really mean a lot to me to have you join us as a subscriber. So thanks for considering. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our interview with director Catriona McKenzie about The Boys Season 4, Episode 7, The Insider. Catriona, it's good to see you. How you doing?
Oh, it's good to see you too, Jeff. Really good. It's nice to be back in LA. I was in Hawaii on something for John Wells, so I'm back, and it's very nice to be back.
And you were shooting on the beach, you told me before we hit the record?
Yeah. It's called Rescue High Surf. It's like, that the pitch was handheld on a beach, and I had the best time. It was fantastic. John Wells is amazing, and cast and crew were fantastic. So it was a total pleasure.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to eventually get to The Boys Season 4, Episode 7, The Insider, but really we're going to be spoiler free for a while. I want to give our listeners and our viewers on our Backstory Magazine YouTube channel a sense of who you are and from whence thou hails. Obviously, you are Australian, and I know that you went to the Australian Film and Television and Radio School, and you graduated in 2001. What was something really important to you that you gleaned about your creative process in your film school days before you went to NYU to study screenwriting, which I know you did next? Just from that, what was something that kind of stayed with you in your creative process that was good from film school?
Well, yeah, I feel like, just a little bit to step back. I was adopted. And so as a little girl, I had this fantasy that my biological mum was a princess and my biological father was a prince. And I had this fantasy about these characters. And then when I met them, because my adoptive family was so awesome, I met them and the reality was quite different. And so it was very humbling, and it was also a great lesson in character, like to be in someone else's character. So the synthesis of all of this new information, in a way, set me up to be a filmmaker. But I didn't realize that at the time, and it was I'm overeducated. I've got quite a few degrees. It's embarrassing how many. Taking this new information and integrating it was one of the things that led me to becoming a filmmaker. And initially I was a writer, and in a way I knew how to write academically. So it was really writing creatively that, I don't know, like maybe we all have it, but it was like a form of therapy, I suppose, what is it to be in someone else's skin, to walk in someone else's shoes? And so for me, filmmaking, I'd met my biological mum and dad, and there was a number of years of synthesizing that information. And then I actually got drunk with an executive, and I was telling them about this idea, which, and it was a really cool idea that I never made. And they said, well, come in Monday, and, and they gave me like 50 cents to basically turn that concept into a script and we never made it, but it was sort of, I tripped and stumbled into the filmmaking world out of that. And so it was like the universe just said, get out of that ivory tower of academia and live with the real people. And I suppose, when I went to first the film school in, Australian Film, Television, Radio School, and then when I went to Tisch, it was the universe saying, here is a gift. Like, you can tell stories about characters. Like, Meg Lefebvre is a friend of mine. She just wrote Inside Out 2, and she runs this screenwriting group. And she says that in order to do unique, undeniable writing, you have to get into the deep lava of who you are as a human to do really great stories. And I feel like I just kind of was given this beautiful, terrible trauma as a kind of a launch pad into being a filmmaker. So, yeah, I started off as a writer. I went to NYU. In order to direct, you have to be an actor for another director. So I tried acting, I did cinematography, I kind of dabbled in everything, and I decided that directing was a thing for me to do because I couldn't be an actor. I'm not brave enough. I'm too fragile to be in front of the camera. But I'm deeply curious about the human condition. I shadowed Ridley Scott on Alien Covenant. And one of the things I love about Ridley is he's very curious about what it is to be human. Like, characters under pressure, Thelma and Louise, Blade Runner, Alien, you name it. And so seeing him in action was really very galvanizing for me. I was like, right.
There's a lot to unpack. I want to slow you down for a second. So there's a lot to unpack. So tell me what you noticed as a difference between your Australian film education and Tisch at NYU. Obviously, you were focusing on screenwriting there. Did you notice anything different about just the way that you were taught, or something that kind of, I don't know, activated another side of your brain maybe?
New York the Australian Film, Television, Radio School is fantastic. There's a lot of resources, and I had the opportunity. I did 5 short films. Like, I really, worked on those muscles of filmmaking, and it was very scrappy, and I did all sorts of community-based projects, and, I actually got things on air, short films on air, on television. Like, I was able to kind of, but I think, New York is like its own country, and I was there when, Aronofsky had just done Pie. And, Scorsese was lecturing me. My first short film out of that actually was a black and white boxing film about an Aboriginal boxer, and kind of started my trajectory. But there was, Spike Lee was there, and he was like, wow, like, get up at 5 o'clock, like, it is a go hard. And then, Jacques Derrida was there, the French philosopher who apologized for the post-structuralist guy who lectured. And it's just a very vibrant, kind of robust city. And I really love Manhattan and New York. And I think it gave me, particularly Pie, I just went, what a big, beautiful idea that's so personal, that's so visual. It was black and white. That was clearly coming out of that NYU experience. We all made these short little black and white movies because it was cheap. And now, you cut your arm off to have some black and white film, it's all that stuff. It put me, I think, in touch with those creatives working at that very high intellectual cinematic level, those thinkers like Derrida, like, the guy's kind of one of the iconic philosophers. And it also put me in touch with the industry, because in America and New York, I didn't go to LA. Well, actually, I ended up in LA. That's a different story. But the industry is we don't have that industry. We don't have that engine, that commerce engine in Australia. We're more like Canada. We have these government grants. So for me to be able I was doing coverage on projects. I was reading lots and lots of scripts. I was talking to lots and lots of people. I was running amok and having adventures. I actually started a dog grooming business at the Pines on Fire Island. Like, I really kind of bedded into the American experience in a really cool way. But yeah, I think there's a hustle to America that I think the epitome of that is in New York, and I love it. I love everything about it.
That's awesome. A dog grooming business. I love it.
It's crazy.
Guy, so that makes sense. That's really cool. You're now reminding me I need to give my dog a bath.
I can do that.
Day, and I had forgotten.
Half rate, mates rates.
Yes, thank you for the reminder. So how about this? Tell me about what this group is that you were talking about that you're in with Meg, the co-writer of Inside Out, because that sounds interesting. It's a screenwriting group.
Meg is a friend of mine, and she has a screenwriting podcast, and she talks about what it is to be to be a writer. And that's something I started out of, and I'm directing now, and I want to get back to writing. She ran Jodie Foster's company, so she was always about character first. And actually, she used to run, I don't want to be telling her stories for her, but she used to run a seminar called Inside Out, because it was all about character first. And then I also work with Jimmy McGovern, who's the UK BAFTA award-winning writer. He did The Cracker, the street, the lakes. And his thing is, you have to fuck your character up. You have to put him in the corner, put as much pressure on as you can, and then the plot takes care of itself. So they were two people, as I was coming up, that were very influential in terms of what's interesting. Is it plot or is it character? And so for me as a filmmaker, I've really been able to, it's a privilege to call these people friends, but that idea that you're coming from character first and you're really looking at the character has just been very informative. I do half-hour comedy and I do drama. I work with Hilary Swank on Alaska Daily, and I did Shining Vale. Jeff Astroff was, the showrunner on Shining Vale with Courtney Cox and Mira Sorvino, and then The Boys, of course, and genre. But to be able to look at any material from that character first for me, has been it's just kind of resonated with me as a way to kind of, yes, you have to understand the story, but if you can really get into the characters, it helps me with my visual language, where I put the camera, the cutting pattern, the cadence, everything. So it's just something that I've grown into.
How important are character goals to you when you're analyzing your character? Because I agree that coming at things from a character perspective, that the plot will resolve itself around the character. Like they do both battle for different parts of your brain and different parts of what the audience requires. But how important is character goal? Is that a way that you get kind of back towards plotting?
The character goal, it's just inevitably you want conflict. It's like Jimmy McGovern says, you got to kind of put as much trauma, you have to traumatize them as much as possible in order for them to activate and fight for that goal. Because I think that's, doesn't matter how much we, after 100 years of cinema, we still need that conflict and characters being blocked. So they need something, they need to go towards something.
How does one end up shadowing Ridley Scott? And what did you notice on the set of Alien Covenant about his creative process specifically?
Post NYU, I had the opportunity to intern at any company, and with the backing of Tish, of course. And so I thought about it, and I thought, who's the filmmaker that I really love? And I love Tarkovsky. He was not with us anymore. I love Peter Weir, but he was back in Australia. And I really love Blade Runner, because for me, it is, what is it to be human, really? And it remains relevant to this day, even more so with AI and all of that. So I applied to just intern at Ridley Scott's company, Scott Free, when they were still in Beverly Hills. And I was a student, and I got this really cheap Bongo van, which is a crappy car. And I literally drove from New York to Los Angeles, and I was camping, because in Australia, when you drive, you can camp because there's 25 million people in a country the size of America. So there's no one there. In America, of course, I was camping, and, I had police pull guns on me in Wichita Falls in Texas because I was camping in the wrong area. Like, it was the full kind of adventure. But I ended up in Beverly Hills, and I interned with Ridley. And I was probably a terrible intern, but I just sat and I read all of the scripts in the vault. I read them all. Things that had been made, things that hadn't been made. Reading scripts is a favourite thing of mine to do. So when years later he was coming to Fox Studios to do Alien Covenant in Sydney, I think it's called something different now, but it's in the same place. I think 10,000 people wanted to shadow him because, the guy's iconic. And I don't know, I met with the producers, and I showed them my feature film that I'd written, directed and produced, and I ended up on set with Ridley for weeks and weeks and weeks. He's an amazing filmmaker, and I was very quiet. I was watching everything. I'm like,
he's on a roll like none other. I mean, he just, Napoleon hit theaters last year. Gladiator 2 is hitting theaters this year. I mean, the guy is on fire. He just keeps going and going and going. I love Ridley Scott. Was there anything you noticed about how he gets through his days? It seems like he doesn't hold on to a lot. Like, he knows what he wants, and when he gets it, he just moves on immediately. Would you say that's right?
Yeah. I mean, again, I was very curious to see what his process was. And what I do know from speaking with him is that I know he shoots the film about 4 times, because he gets the script, and obviously that's another process there, but he storyboards, because he's a left-hander. He's a beautiful artist. He storyboards everything, turns those storyboards into an animatic. And then obviously it's very technical. A lot of the filmmaking he makes is technical. So there's a stunt viz process where the stunt people take those storyboards and, do the animatic of the stunts. And then he doesn't do normal coverage. He does this really fantastic thing where it takes he doesn't do wide 2-shot close-up. He basically lights the whole space. So Darius it's quite challenging. I'm sure you have to have a really amazing DP. And then he puts cameras in all different places. So it takes a long time to set up. But once you've shot it, 2 takes, and then he edits it on set. I hope I'm not divulging things I shouldn't be divulging, but
This has been covered in many different places, so
I'm sure it has. I'm sure it has.
like it's that big of a secret, but it's interesting.
Yeah, but it was very interesting because he's a deeply curious individual. He's incredibly smart. He's very wise to the ways of the world. I mean, he's deep and wide and insightful, and just his eye, watching him build up a frame for me was like, he's got a great eye, you know, and I was like, yeah, that's good. But, you know, it was just, I was a kid in a candy store for sure. And I think, you know, and lots of things actually, particularly with, I do a lot of CGI and VFX. And one of the things I learned from Ridley was in camera is good. Even if you're going to replace 85% of an alien or something, you know, to have a Muppet, you know, a puppet, something like, you know, that the actor can react to, that the editor can be cutting, even if it's going to be replaced, it just becomes incredibly smart filmmaking. And also you can do it economically too. Like there's been times where I just worked on something called The Bondsman with Kevin Bacon and Eric Olison, who is an amazing showrunner, and Kevin Bacon is incredible, you know, and just knowing when you can do stuff in camera and when it has to be VFX is just, it's good to be able to know how you can pass that stuff out. But seeing Ridley do that on set was amazing. So
him editing on set had him going and being like, ooh, you know what? I want to do a different angle. Like him being able to see the edit go that fast was
I never saw that. He's very clear about what he wants.
Yeah.
He's very clear about where he wants the lens, and in relation to, I mean, he's just he's a genius filmmaker. I never saw that. It would be like cut a frame here, cut a frame there. Great, it's done.
Right. So he's just already in his editing mode. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, so I want to get to The Boys, but like before I do, I'd be remiss. Your debut independent feature film, Satellite Boy, really put you on the map. What was your biggest lesson from that? What was something where you're now taking your film school experiences and you're living them out to do a feature that got a lot of acclaim and put you on the map?
I mean, I wrote, directed, and produced that. It was a love letter because I'm, you know, adopted, and it was for both fathers. It was like this love letter to my fathers. So it was very personal. And I did what you should never do. Like I worked with kids who'd never acted before in the middle of the desert, which was basically, there were saltwater crocodiles, there were taipan snakes, it was incredibly remote. You have to have a singular vision. You can't fuck around in the middle of the bush because there are things that will kill you. Like everyone says in Australia, everything will kill you. So I think it's about staying very focused, light on your feet, but focused. And, you know, you have to meet your actors where they're at, because I'm not working with Michael Fassbender. I'm working with a 10-year-old amazing young man called Cameron Wallaby who has never acted before and is perhaps not even that interested. You know, like it was kind of a lark, really. Yeah. And it was hard work for that kid. So, you know, it's about meeting the moment rather than, and if you don't have the perfect, you know, like the sun is setting, it's golden, it's magic hour, and the actor can't get the line, so you miss the light, so you have to pivot. So I think it was about being stubbornly focused on the material and using whatever clusterfucks were happening to get what the story required within the crazy, you know, the boundaries that were very tight boundaries. So, yeah.
It's the same directing challenge that you always have.
You always have it. It doesn't matter whether the boys or whether it's something, you just never have enough money, you never have enough time. It's a very human, sweaty thing with actors who have lives. So you just, you know, kindness goes a long way. That's what I learned. It's
one thing to do your own movie or your own TV show, but like coming into an already existing intellectual property the way that you have before, specifically from comic books like Walking Dead and Marvel's Echo, it's a different beast to an extent because the assignment is you want it to feel like the rest of the season, even though you're there to direct like an episode or two. But at the same time, you still want to leave your mark on it. You want to make it special. So you have a continuity because of the actors, the sets, the ongoing story. But at the same time, you want to break out. So what have you found as the challenges, you know, and if there's anything you want to tell us about your experiences on Walking Dead or Echo and how you knew that you were part of a different train, but you wanted to paint your train car a specific color so it was still feeling like yours.
I mean, in a way, there's a fabulous safety because, yes, it's established, it's the world, it's set up. But actually, the way that I think, because I don't know, like I'm a beekeeper and I restore cars and I don't really have the fear thing. I'm more like, we could do this and we could. So I think for me, particularly in Echo, it gave me a lot of freedom because Episode 3 was in a skate rink, and I rocked up to that rink, and the space didn't really work for the script. But there was the world, and I had the characters, and I had the resources. And so I just invented this sort of stunt section of this film where she breaks through the wall and she fights with all of these retro, 50s and 60s pinball machines and arcade games. And in a way, it just gave me a lot of freedom because it was all there. And, often boundaries are the things that make us better because they put pressure on you. And it was a bottle episode. So they gave me lemons and I made lemonade. It was like you make it work. And again, those guys are such custodians of their characters, and the show really knew what it was. And I just played. I played with the actors. I would play music to create a sense of suspense for them. I love to throw the camera around. I love to find different visual language kind of moments for narrative turning points. I just played with them. I actually loved it. I'd love to do a pilot. I'm ready to do. I did 4 pilots in Australia, and I've done the movies, and now I'm in America, and I'm ready to do the pilot, the movie, the original material. But there is a lot of fun to be had in dropping into an engine that's running, and as long as you can read the room quickly and kind of figure out how to play, I just think it's fantastic.
And you've definitely excelled at it. Getting a directing gig on The Boys is like a dream for any director. I love the show. I'm a huge fan. How did you end up getting the gig?
I saw the first episode of The Boys and I was like, whoa, what? And, I'm Australian, and Butcher, he drops the C-bomb. And I'm like, what? I was like, you can't drop the C-bomb when you go to the States because they don't understand. Their hair will fall out. It's really bad. Right. And here was this guy, it was so transgressive and so audacious and fresh. And I was like, hey, this is the best thing I've ever seen, So I was on Echo, and I'd watched everything because I love the show anyway. And I'd just seen the show where that little guy goes into his lover's penis and sneezes because he's, and it was like, oh my God. So the first thing I said to Eric Kripke is like, is there any line you won't cross? And he said, I'll never forget it, he goes, we always punch up, we never punch down. And I thought, you're my guy, because he is, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's very clear about what he's saying and what he's doing. And, I was raised in a very political family, and I don't like political content. I think it can get boring really quickly. But I thought the satirical elements of The Boys was just perfect. And it was big and bold and genre and amazing actors. And we just clicked. It was a really good meeting. And, I'm really happy that everyone seems to love Ep 7, and it was so much fun to do.
The only other non-spoiler question that I have for you is, how long was it to shoot an episode like this? How many days did you have to shoot it, and how long was pre-production?
It was a particularly big episode because I think tomorrow the finale drops that Eric Kripke directed, and I'm so excited to see that. The second last episode, there was a lot of heavy lifting to do to set up for the finale. There's a beloved location that we destroyed, and that took 10 days to film, and it took many, John Koyama was our stunt coordinator, who's amazing. I think he won an Emmy for season 3 last year, and he trains all the actors and everyone. It's a very cohesive team. And so, it took 10 days to do this particular stunt. It's stunts on stunts on stunts, and we slowly destroy this space. And because of the way we had to shoot it, it took, that was 10 days of filming, which is usually one episode. That was just one scene.
Right, so how long was this episode to film then, if that was 10 days?
Oh, I mean, it would have been, I feel like it was 3 weeks. It must have been more than that. It must have been. I was up in Toronto for a long time. It felt like a couple of months. So it was.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, I want to get right into the spoilers. So,
okay, let's do it.
Podcast listeners and iTunes and Spotify and YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where these Zoom interviews go. If you have not yet seen The Boys season 4, episode 7, press pause, go watch it, and come back, because we are going to get into the fine details about that episode called The Insider right now. So a second ago, you were talking about the destruction of the office in the Flatiron building. That's so wild that it took 10 days. I mean, I guess another question is, when you come on as a director, how much time do you have for rehearsal with actors, if you like to do that, versus stunt coordination and blocking type of things that you would clearly need to do for a fight that elaborate?
I mean, in The Boys, because it's such a big show, and particularly for this episode, because the stunts were so expansive, Coy had already started to build some of those stunts. They had to be started before I ever arrived, because it was just too big to be able to do. I always storyboard. I storyboard everything because it's just a very clear communication device. And so I'd storyboarded everything, and he had previs for what the fights could be, and we kind of merged those storyboards together so that everyone was very clear about how we were going to do it in what order, because as things slowly become destroyed, you can't go back. Like, you have to get it all as you're going, you know.
Was that a matter of facing the camera one way and getting all your coverage for one side of the fight and destroying the stuff on that side, and then facing the camera the other way for the other side?
There was a little bit of that. I mean, the Flatiron is basically a triangle, and we did shoot on, and there are two parallel fights that are happening, and we certainly did do one side and then we did the other. That's very insightful, Jeff, that you saw that. That was, yeah. So we did a bit of that, and we would also do it up to parts of the stunt fight. Like, there's a few moments where whole columns collapse. We did the fight up until there's a few punches and there's plaster that has to be set and rigged, and then we had to sort of break that and bring in a completely different breakable column that could be completely destroyed by an actor's body. So we were doing it in stages, both parallel fights directionally, but also in terms of how much the destruction was. You know, sometimes once things were established with the actual stunt, that was preserved because we didn't want to have to go back and redress it. So it was trying to preserve the actual action, keeping that, and then marching forward so we didn't have to reset stuff, clean it up and do it again. So we were trying to be efficient. Hopefully when people see it, they'll understand. I go, oh my God.
It's a fantastic scene, and it really goes beat by beat. And, you know, you were talking earlier about the way that Ridley wouldn't just do wide, you know, close up, you know, medium coverage. It seems here that sometimes your shots were so storyboarded, so comic book like, that you really are cutting them on paper, because it didn't seem like you were just trying to do a kind of bland medium shot and just let the fight play out in it. You were cutting into the fight a lot. Would that be accurate to say that you could do some of that cutting on paper?
Absolutely. There was one fight between the Deep and A-Train where the way we'd storyboarded it on the day, I was like, oh my God, I can't do that. I have to do something completely different. And actually the way that I shot it is in the cut, which is good. But I mean, it's a comic. I want it to be very graphic, but I also think that action without character beats. Like, that fight is all about characters having their moment with each other, like how the Deep feels about Starlight, you know, like, and how that, you know, like, all of those things have to have character moments. So it's action, but it's got to be grounded in character. Otherwise it's just a smear of visual noise. And that's not how I like to do action. I like it to mean something. So yeah, like, it is a bit of this. It's pretty MCU close up, and then it's chaos, and how the action hits the characters and is really important to me. So it was fun to do. Yeah.
Great. What could you tell me about collaborating with Paul Grelong, who wrote the script, and also Eric for this? Because I love this script. This was a you know, all the story ideas were popping. There's so much going on that's character driven. What were some of the changes that you saw? Was there anything on the page that never got shot? Or anything that was shot that then you guys kind of just ditched, which is very rare for television, but I'd still believe it.
I don't think I watched the release cut with a lot of VFX work in it. I mean, firstly, Eric Kripke is amazing. He knows the show. He knows exactly what he's doing, and I feel like I'm in great hands with a showrunner like that. And then Paul, we literally bumped into each other at the airport flying up to Toronto and Air Canada. We were shoulder to shoulder through the whole process. Any question, he was the vault, you know. Any question I had, he knew the answer. Any lines that were not kind of maybe singing, or he would write a better version. I mean, the guy, Paul, is an amazing playwright. He's had stuff on at the Geffen, The Power of the Sail. You know, the guy's a deeply intellectual, very human, you know, he's an amazing human being. So, I mean, the script is beautiful, and it kind of, what I got and what I shot is sort of what went to air. I mean, it really is. A couple of times I threw a few lines, like improvised lines at an actor, and it was never as good as what Paul would come up with. So I just bow down to Paul, and yeah, I hope I get to work with him again. He's amazing.
You know, I'm a longtime fan of the Broadway musical. Sorry, it started off Broadway, Avenue Q, and then it went to Broadway. And your episode starts with Avenue V. You know, the puppet episode. So it's kind of like a parody, a little, of Avenue Q. What did you learn about directing puppets?
I'd never directed puppets. When I first sat down to read the script, I was like, oh, it's a Christmas episode. I'm like, oh, here we go, because I knew that was going to be like, oh my
Right.
God. And then the puppets, I've never worked with puppets. Those puppeteers, the way that they make those little kind of inanimate, they are amazing. And some of them actually make the cut at the end when it turns to pear-shaped and they kind of come out from behind their boxes. Those guys are incredible. They just make those puppets come alive. It was almost, it's like mask work. There's some kind of magic that happens, which is a little unnerving, you know. There was a bit of rehearsal that went into that. You know, we tried to keep it lo-fi looking, like it's meant to be like a bit of a daggy old Christmas special, you know, that they're rehearsing. But those puppets are actually very sophisticated and they're very expensive.
I hope they kind of come back. I mean, the fact that they had to build them and that they use them, I hope it's something that they continue to do in other iterations. So I thought that was cool. You know, what could you tell us about kind of your pre-production process? What was important to you for previs or stunt coordination beyond just the fight at the Flatiron Building? What do you remember before production started as being some I don't know, just interesting things that you really wanted to iron out as a director?
I mean, the first time I read a script is really important. And I know that there's, you know, I always try and be in a quiet space where I won't be interrupted, because that first read, I never get it back. Like, that first read is very important. Honestly, most of the you know, like when I'm doing a television episode and there's VFX, like I talk about coupons. How many coupons do I get? You might get 3 coupons. You might get 7. Like The Boys, I don't know how many, there's like 100 coupons. And so like there were so many scenes where there was a VFX coupon, a special effects coupon. There was something, if I want A-Train to kind of rustle some papers, that's a little blower. I can do that in camera. So I don't need a VFX coupon. So I can save that money and I can put it into destroying the Flatiron office, or, you know, like I Killed Tilda Swinton's voice, like Ambrosia. Like, just to talk about that.
We'll get there, I promise, because that was hilarious. So it was really just analyzing the script, analyzing what your visual effects were. I mean, I guess that's an interesting question. Is it a problem if you have an idea that pushes the budget a little when already they have, you know, a dedicated VFX team for all the other episodes and you're on the penultimate episode anyhow? Like, what was there ever a limitation that you saw financially?
It's a big show, and it's the coupons. There's many coupons, and the bit of string is long and wide. But still, I feel like there's a responsibility. You still never have enough time or money because it's still, you have boundaries, and I do think boundaries are great. And sometimes having everything doesn't make it better. So I think if I added something here, then I would lose it there. And if I like, for example, with the web weaver moment, are we getting into spoilers? That's a very technical shot. There's a cast made of a human actor to replica intestines held together with magnets, with lots of blood tubes and lots of rigging. And so when Anthony does his action and rips that apart, there was blood splattered on the lens. And it was so cool. It was awesome. It was amazing. But of course, that's really bad for VFX, because that actually makes VFX like that's becomes wildly. So it was an amazing take, and I was like, I have to do it again. So we had to clean up all that blood, put all the intestines back in that cadaver of the replica, put the magnets back together.
We were like, okay, while you guys are rebuilding it, I'm going to go to close-ups of their head and shoulders.
No, at that stage, it was like get a coffee and just. It was towards the end of the shoot, and at that point, there was not much to be done. But you know, the responsible thing to do is to go, you know what, I can't put that budget item on VFX. It's too much. It's not even the money; it's the time that, you know, like 8 months in VFX land before it goes to air. I can't add a month just because I'm being stupid about, you know. Right. So I had to do the right thing and go back and redo it. And, you know, I have to be responsible.
That gives me a question, because you said it was towards the end of the shoot. Obviously, things are shot out of order. Was the first thing shot the Flatiron Building fight because you knew that you needed to get it done early, and if you needed to go over, you would have the time to see where the budget was, or was Flatiron done towards the end of the shoot?
It was not the first week, but the second and third week, because there was sometimes the stunt unit was doing stuff, and sometimes I'd come in. We wanted to get all the character beats first, and then we got into the stunt stuff, which was both stunt performers and actors.
Your role as a director to be there when the A actors are there, and let the second unit do the stunt stuff, which is very common.
Yeah. I like to be there. I like to always, again, it's like, stunts without character is for me. It's, I like to muck around with the performance.
You were talking about Web Weaver a second ago, and obviously that's a great bit of comedic timing in which basically he has a web hole on the back that shoots out his web, and basically he's so nervous that he's in captivity and that he gave them his suit in the previous episode that he keeps spurting web fluid, not even making webs, by the way. I don't know if there was ever a plan to make a web. It's just fluid all over the place. And you kept milking it, no pun intended, in the funniest of ways, in which, Homelander is really losing his patience on this guy, and the guy's not answering his questions. And I'm curious if that was something that you kind of had to find through a rehearsal of how many times he's having this interruption of, incredible gas and having his web fluid activate at the same time, because maybe too many more of those wouldn't have been funny. Too less might not have been funny. Like, it seems like you got exactly the right balance.
So I always have a private rehearsal, and we did shape that. And it is funny. I have a 15-year-old son, and of course he watches that because I'm a terrible parent. And he really appreciated that scene for everything it was, because it's kind of beautifully disgusting and comedic, and we all know what it is. So
it was great comedic timing. So it was just like a private rehearsal, and then you went straight into it.
Yeah, a private rehearsal. Anthony loves to rehearse. He loves to find those beats. Marked it, talked about the beats, maybe adjusted one thing, and then we shot the shit out of it.
That makes sense. How many cameras are you shooting with when you shoot generally?
With the stunts, we have 3 cameras. Usually I have 2 cameras. And sometimes I'll go single camera because I like a nice tight eye line. And sometimes when I've got 2 cameras, I don't like to compromise eye line.
Ooh, hey, I'm just jumping in really quick to remind you to check out Backstory Magazine. We had our birthday this summer. We are 12 years old officially. So yeah, we still can't drive. You're safe on the roads. Don't worry about it. But look, if you've never read us before, I hope you check out our free issue, which you could read at backstory.net on a desktop or laptop, or via our iPad app, Backstory. And once you read our free issue, after realizing that there's great interviews and scripts to read in every single issue, and you want to become a subscriber, and I hope that you do, you could use discount coupon code SAVE5 at our website. That's SAVE and the number 5, and that will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. And yes, your website credentials will work to log you in on an iPad as well. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and our YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where all these Zoomcasts are sent so you can see us talking there. It would really mean a lot to me to have you consider supporting my passion project. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right back into our interview with director Catriona McKenzie about her excellent episode of The Boys, Season 4, Episode 7, The Insider. When A-Train and Martin were talking about Martin leaving town, and A-Train tries to stop him, and really the show's about the creep of fascism coming at you. And, Martin says that he's going to go to Belize. He's sending his family to Belize, and he wants to go there with him and finally get out of the game. And A-Train smartly reminds him that, no matter where you go, it's probably going to catch up to you, which is true for most fascism, especially true here where it's superheroes versus humans. That seemed like something that was more static, was more of a possible single camera place. You also have a good knack for these non-special effects, non-fighting scenes too, where 2 characters are just having a heart-to-heart. And that was one of multiple ones in this episode.
They did beautiful work in that scene. I remember that. We just really quietly rehearsed it, and the production design is so great. Like, you put these actors, beautiful actors, in these great sets, and it just lent itself to that more kind of, it is quite static. It's the emotion. And I think we had 2 cameras, but we didn't sacrifice but I did really work on those performances, and they're great. A lot of people have said how much those actors were doing such a fine job. So
it was great.
We were
talking a second ago about the death of the octopus girlfriend. Tilda Swinton plays the voice, realizes that the Deep has been cheating on her and he's getting sick of her. And talk about that scene, the rules. Like, there's times where she's been out of her tank and he wants to put her back in. And she's like, no, I can stay out longer. So how long can an octopus live outside the water and need to be back in? And what was your goal for shooting that scene and the difficulties of shooting that scene? Because it was, again, comedic timing, just like with Web Weaver, in which like she keeps dying, and you just did this great thing that is a superhero cliche. You used it to comedic effect, in which the music rises and he's ready to get emotional, and then she's still alive, and then he has to like wait for her to die again before getting emotional, and it was hilarious.
I mean, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I never got to work with Tilda Swinton. That was her voice. On the day, there was a guy reading Tilda's Ambrosius lines. But when the Deep smashes the fish tank, obviously he can't smash glass. So there was no glass there. It was all blue screen. There was no octopus there. It was just it's a Muppet. It was actually very technical. Like that shot was a lot of coupons, and it's weird because all he does is go like this, but VFX water is just beyond us. So we had to have real water that had to come out exactly at the right timing of when the actor did his action. So that shot, we rehearsed that shot 20 times. There was special effects, there were guys, we had to make, everything had to be smash glass, or there's actually a profile where the water hits him in the body. So that we rehearsed it 20 times, and then I think it was 2 a.m. or something outrageous. And we just did one take where we actually had the water come out, and we got it. It was fantastic. Everything was in sync. Yeah, that was a great scene. We did a number of different versions of that. We did, where the actor was just like devastated. And anyway, so yeah, he did a fantastic job of playing in that water and really milking those emotions. And she just wouldn't die. And we did play that. That was great. I'm glad that made the cut, actually, because that was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great scene. And again, kudos, like great comedic timing. And I'm guessing like somebody else like directed Tilda, or did they just send her the script and she voiced?
I don't know. I feel like saying, "Oh, Tilda,"
my dearest friend. Yes, but I mean that makes sense. So at that point they hadn't even recorded her voice.
She was definitely riffing off the cut, which was fantastic. Yeah.
Another rig that had a very intimate, good feel. It kind of reminded me of some of the moments in Train Spotting, when Butcher's really drunk at the bar. He's dealing with Kessler, with Joe, his imaginary friend, which is really just part of his consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And he has his good side and his bad side, his wife being his good side. He's just getting really drunk and he falls to the ground. And it reminded me of like when Ewan McGregor fell to the ground high a few times in Train Spotting.
Oh, yeah.
It was a fascinating camera rig. I'm curious.
Well, thank you for noticing that shot, because one of the things I like to do is I like to have fun on set. I like everyone to feel safe, and so they can have big swings, whether it's actors or crew. And so, leading with kindness, I think for me is really important, because people feel that they can have these big swings. So when I wanted to do that shot, we have all the toys in the world, but we didn't actually have the toys to do that total shot. And so I spoke with the grips. I said, well, this is what I want to do. And they were like, oh, okay, well, leave it with us. And they took a week to go away, and they came back with this wacky looking rig, and they showed me on, I think it was one of the grip assistants, like he fell down, and it was the coolest shot in the world. And I think that's important, to be able to, if you want to do stuff that really pushes the boundaries, then allow people to do their best work. It's a team sport filmmaking. It's not like so I feel like for everyone to bring their best selves to the party and to have fun doing it. Like when that shot went down and it was so cool on the day, like there were high fives. Everyone was high fiving. It wasn't like cool shot, Cat. It was, you guys rock. Grip department made this happen. You know what I mean? Like it's really cool.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it was awesome. How many times did you have to do it?
We did it 3 times.
Okay. And so, just because we live in a great world of special effects, was it like a fake floor that was like a cushion he was falling into replaced with real floor? Or
we did do that.
Or was it a wire rig that was slowing his fall and you were filming at a different speed? Tell us about your...
He went down onto his knees. Yeah, we did. We put a very small mat down and we covered it. We matched the floor so it was seamless. And then Carl was on his knees and he just fell forward. So he wasn't hurting himself because it was padded. And the camera, it was just a question of following him. So we just rehearsed a few times with our stunt stand-in, and Carl could see the shot and see what we were going for, and then he did it 3 times, and it was really about the way his face fell on the floor. I just wanted to be able to track him more than the movement,
And you were on a really wide lens so that the camera could be up close. So, I mean, like that was perfect too. I mean, it was all the things firing absolutely great there. Another A-Train scene is like that intimate scene with him and Ashley where he says that he could take her with him. because he's been outed as the mole
leak.
in the organization. And it was even Ashley's idea that, she's like, we could go to Florence. I spent, a year there in college. And there's that crazy picture of her on her desk. But like, she doesn't go. And like, that was an interesting scene. I mean, obviously she's going to stay a character on the show, and so is he. But was there ever, even for a moment, the idea of them running off together? Because I could see a writer exploring that for 5 or 10 minutes. Or was by the time you had the script, it was just that's the way it is, and she stays because she needs the greed, she needs the power of running.
Well, she's made her bed, and she's got this. It's a terrible bed. Like, what is she without? Like, I mean, in I always do a number of different takes, and there was one take where she really considers it a lot longer, I think, than made the cut. Like, she really is like, oh yeah, I could really do that. And I do like to play with those beats. Like, everything's broken up for me into beats, like with each actor, where every scene has a beginning, middle, and end. And I get into the minutiae of that. And I don't want to I don't want to encumber the actor too much on set. But we did play with for how long she kind of has a fantasy before she realizes that if she leaves, she's dead. The only way she can survive is if she stays within that power structure. So, but she's a fabulous actress. Like, I love working with her. She's great.
Was great. Now, for all the things you did, it's still within the wheelhouse of what's been going on with the boys, but you also had an opportunity to expand those edges a little, in which there's a new character introduced who we don't really see. It's a shapeshifter. And you have this great sequence of them running down the stairs as the shapeshifter, rather than like, a cute morph, that's really clean in special effects. The shapeshifter is shedding the skin of the old body and leaving all the like yucky skin and hair and everything and blood on the walls as they're chasing it down the stairs. What were the challenges of that? Because that was like, we've seen a lot of people running downstairs before, but like running downstairs and shedding your body. Yeah, that was kind of a new one.
Yeah. They're running downstairs. We've got a descender rig and going through the middle, following them as they're coming down. That's okay. That's a bit of a toy that can be a pain in the ass. But those actors had to run down the stairs so many times to get all the different angles because of the way that we put the skin on our stunt performer, who's fabulous, Naomi. We had to apply the skin, and there was only so many times because, again, the time for the day, it was a location. It didn't. We could only be there one day. We didn't have all the time in the world. Right. So her skin, like the plastic prosthetic skin that she put on herself, was starting to look really bad, and the resets weren't great. So she was literally pulling skin off. And there was bits of kind of like part of her breast, like skin, like it was really. So we could only do that so many times. And we did the classic, attach the camera to her body so she gets that,
What kind of rig was that when you do that?
It's like a GoPro. It's like a GoPro that's kind of. Wasn't a GoPro. It might have been a Black Magic actually, but it was.
But it's something the actor's holding in front of them, right?
It's kind of strapped onto them and it comes off, and she's a stunt. She's unbelievably athletic. It's fantastic. And it's quite cumbersome because the lens is about, 1.5 feet to, it's not like it's there. So she's running with this crazy rig. So it was quite, and she's sort of operating it and running and pulling skin off. So it was very difficult for her to do. So, all those bits, all those shots go together to make hopefully an exciting, sequence, which was fun to do. But those actors, everyone was exhausted. Blood, goop, gravity up and down those marble steps. Very hard.
Cleaning it up between takes was not easy. So
yeah, we tried not to do too many resets, but yes, it was definitely a thing. Yep.
I mean, also you're then directing Annie, and so it's a different version of Annie now. Some geeky folks, and I noticed this too, if I'm remembering it right, and who knows, maybe we're all remembering it wrong, she does open the safe. And I'm not sure how a shapeshifter would figure out how to open the safe. It seemed like she typed in a code, so it didn't seem like it required eye recognition or a fingerprint. That's geeky aside. I know, but how did you direct, the great actress who plays Starlight to be this other version of herself where, she just kind of has sex with Huey to get him to go to sleep?
Well, it's really interesting because, there was a point because, they have a meeting where Samir has, they've cut off Kimiko's leg and they've all come together and the leg's there and
That's my next question, but we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, is Starlight the shapeshifter there? like when does she become the shapeshifter? So it was very, I played with that performance as well. But we just talked about stillness and sexual. I mean, her hair is really sexy in that shot when she comes into the bedroom. We just talked about how the stillness of her as an actor is belies the fact that she's not actually this human. She's a little bit, she's the shapeshifter. So it was just working with that stillness, and Erin's amazing. So it was.
Yeah, and it was a good reveal at the bar. It was the older lady who took a selfie with her was the last version of the shapeshifters. You were talking about when Komiko has to cut off her leg with Frenchie, and basically that's an interesting scene because we've seen that in horror movies before. Cut it off before the virus spreads. What could you tell us about doing something like that? Because it was very fast. The visual language was solid about you see it spreading in her leg, and Frenchie is trying to tie off the leg so that the blood won't circulate past there. What were the challenges of filming that?
Well, again, that seems really simple, but it wasn't that simple. We had to make a leg. We had to put blue over. We had to find a surface where she could put her leg down and join the fake leg. There was VFX going on with that. Obviously, the virus going up was VFX. There was blood tubes with blood rigs and blood squirting out so that it looked like it really was being cut off. So it was uncomfortable for the actor to sit there with one leg down on, and brace themselves. And then we had to swap out and do inserts of the actual kind of sawing, which was the meaty part. So the whole thing was probably 3 different stages to getting that one sequence. But again, it was sort of, I love those characters, Karen and Tamer. They're just so lovely actors, and the way their connection across everything is fantastic. But it was funny too. He loves her, and there's blood all over the little buzzy bee. Like, it was just like...
Right. I mean, and thematically, the idea of this virus that could kill all superheroes, that if they activated in a dose strong enough for Homelander, could become a worldwide pandemic that would kill anybody that has, the V in their bloodstream, which would mean that Huey would die, Starlight would die, Butcher obviously is on his way out. So I mean, like, there's a lot to consider as they're going into this next step. So I mean, like, it was an important scene because they had to get that virus back, but it was no surprise that Samir was more than happy to give it to them after he had his own legs, cut off as well.
Yeah.
He was obviously suffering there too. And I thought it was interesting they were going to release him, and then he still just gets away.
I was just going to say that, tomorrow, Thursday, is the finale, and that's when all Eric Kripke is going to bring it home with all these storylines, and I'm so excited to see it. Like, I just know from everything that I heard and read, and that it's going to be a spectacular episode. So,
well, your episode ends on Starlight locked up somewhere, and we hear a creak off camera. Was that always the ending? I mean, I know that if there was something too spoilery, you might not be able to tell us, but was it always her locked up, or was there another scene that was maybe never even shot that ended your episode?
That was always the ending. I mean, I feel I think we need that sort of, it's a good hook, we need that hook into the finale. Because, yeah.
Just a few more lightning questions for you. All the planning in the world, what was something that really was like a happy accident on set? Something that worked in your favor, was one of those lucky moments?
I mean, I feel like the challenge of storyboarding everything is that the risk is that you just get exactly what you storyboarded, and that is a terrible thing, actually. So I think I like to create an environment on set where we tell the story, we do exactly as the script, but we actually discover moments and we have happy accidents. Oh, there's the fight in the Flatiron, and we had storyboarded it differently. It was a different way of telling it, and I realized, I'm like, oh my God, if I do that, it's going to be terrible. And so on the day, I was like, I'm sorry, guys, because we hadn't budgeted for that time, because every setup, every shot's 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And so I had to pivot and I had to shoot it a different way. That was a happy accident that was great. I was just really impressed with how everyone would just come to set. The second last episode, it's very physically demanding. Everyone brought their best versions, like they were always happy on set. They were very buoyant. They were like ready to play. They were happy to take direction and go, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Like, so I just loved the spirit of the cast and crew, If you can play and you can find stuff within your allotted time, I just think you get better stuff.
What was the scene that you were dreading, or moment, over and over again, and took the took the most time to prepare, and how did you rise to the challenge?
I mean, the Flatiron fight is a marathon. It's not one scene. It's I don't know, like 30 scenes in one scene, and that's an endurance test. I was a little bit worried about the web weaver scene because there's all this stuff going on and it's funny, but tonally getting the tone right. I feel like that's the shots are the shots. The actors are doing beautiful work, but getting the tone right for me is often like that's the pointy end of the work. And getting that right, I think is really important. And that scene worried me because it was like, oh my God, he's kind of ejaculating out of his bum, and and I know what's coming, but we can't telegraph that. And it's a very political scene, actually. It's zeitgeisty. I think it's really fantastic. Getting that right was definitely the trick of that scene, getting the tone right.
It's comedic, but also, from the reaction shot you got from Firecracker, she was terrified of what Homelander did.
What have we done?
Reminded of how dangerous he is. So that worked as well. And, going back to Flatiron, you saying it was difficult. One thing I want to point out is that there were so many actors in the scene to begin with that just if they were sitting around having a conversation and not fighting, it's still a directing nightmare sometimes as to who's where and what's going on. The only other part of that scene that we didn't talk about was the narcoleptic concept came in. What do you remember about that?
That was always in the script. That's kind of that's a beautiful Kripke, Paul Grelon kind of, and I think that's the whole thing about the evolution of noir, because he is a bit of a discovery and we discover things about him in that scene. But I love that about The Boys. I love that you're heading in this direction and then there's a pivot and, I love that. It's just, those comedic moments amidst, the chaos is why it's so awesome.
How involved were you able to be in editing, the last stage of storytelling? Sometimes directors, they get it shot and then they see a final cut. Sometimes directors are able to be involved with the cut and give notes. What was kind of your role here?
One of the first phone calls I'd ever do when I'm first dropping into an engine is I always call the editor, because the editor becomes my first audience. Like, I'm the audience for the actors, but my editor is like my therapist. And I'm like, I'm telling you, you're my therapist. Day 3, I'll be calling you about dailies. And I always like to ask them, what's working? What's not working? Like, what are you seeing in a pristine, sanitized room that's not madness. And I like to be very involved in editing, and I even like them to be, if there's any scene that I'm worried about, I'll get them to send me a cut of that scene more quickly. I work very closely with them, because then if there is any clusterfucks, like there hasn't been, but if there is, and they go, I really think you need this, then we can factor that in moving forward. We can do it. We can just schedule it so that we can kind of, make that happen.
Was there anything that saved you from that experience, or something interesting the editor told you that you were like, oh, I could adjust this?
Some actors just need a bit of warming up. Some actors, they have an emotional, they can do it 2 or 3 times. They like to go first. There's all sorts of, it's a very human thing that we do, and so I like to be able to meet the people where they're at, whether it's the actors, whether it's just another layer of information that helps me do my job better.
What are you working on next that you could tell us about?
Well, there was the Kevin Bacon Bondsman with Eric Olison. I love him. Love them both. John Wells in Hawaii, Handheld on a Beach. That was amazing. That's the hat. I have a T-shirt collection of all the shows that I've ever worked on. I'm going up to do Gen V, and I'm very excited about that. And in fact, I'm working with the same editor that cut Ep 7. And then there's something in Vancouver that I can't talk about because it's not quite locked in yet, but I'm very excited about that.
Is there a screenplay you might be working on your own, kind of on spec?
My next chapter is I am getting back to writing. I've got so many stories that I want to tell, and I feel like moving to a new country, like Hollywood was built on the back of immigrants coming to this country and coming to the West Coast and building an industry. And I feel that I have all these insights I love America and I love being here, and I've got stories to tell that kind of reflect that. And, I'm a big fan of Terrence Malick, but also, like Crash is an amazing film. Obviously, he didn't direct that, but I have projects both in television and film that I'm getting ready to take to the marketplace, and I'm very excited about that too. So
that's great. Well, I can't wait to see what you do next. I love your episode of The Boys. Catriona, thanks for being so generous with your time today.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks so much.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to director Catriona McKenzie for being so generous with her time in chatting about her excellent episode of The Boys, Season 4, Episode 7, The the insider. And folks, while you're surfing around online, it's the perfect time to check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You could read us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. You know, if you've never read us before, we have a free issue waiting there for you. And if you read it and like what you see and realize that we have great interviews and scripts that you could read within our magazine, many of which you can't find anywhere else, if you want to become a subscriber after all that, and we would love to have you, I'm here to offer you discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5. Just enter it in the shopping cart on our website. Your login credentials there will still get you logged in on an iPad as well, and it'll save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and our YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where all these Zoomcasts, that's right, these Zoom interviews go, so you could watch us talk on our YouTube page. It would really mean a lot to me to have you join us as a subscriber, so thanks for considering. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2024. All rights reserved. Folks, if you want to reach out to me anytime, I'm pretty easy to find on Twitter, aka X. I am Yo Goldsmith or Backstory_mag. Those same usernames apply to Instagram, where I am also Yo Goldsmith or Backstory_mag. I have a Facebook fan page that you could join. That's another easy way. And of course, you could always drop me an email to backstoryletters@gmail.com, and I'll do my best to reply. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.